Caseus. Jedi Exile. Chapter 2. Caseus slept in the comfortable bed as visions slowly crawled into his head. He once again saw a field of lush grain under an overcast sky. He'd had this dream before during the war. Now he recognized it. Dantooine. In the distance, the small town. Once more he tried to get closer to it, but instead saw a young girl holding out her hand to him. Who was she? Caseus reached out to take her hand.
Rise and shine, boy.
Caseus awoke from the dream and sat up.
Time for breakfast. Head downstairs when you're ready.
Caseus looked out the window. It's not even light out yet.
Welcome to a farmer's life, Caseus.
Sabo left the room as Caseus got up and put on his boots and outer tunic that Sabo had given him. He went downstairs and sat to a meal of eggs, meat, and bread before following Sabo outside to his barn. I should tell you, I don't know the first thing about farming.
You trained as a Jedi, right? Compared to that, farming should be a breeze for you.
Sabo opened the doors to the barn and stepped inside, followed by Caseus. Old pieces of farm equipment hung all throughout the large structure. Old threshers, rakes, shovels, and small vehicles used for tilling. Underneath his feet, Caseus saw what looked like an enormous metal door. The area beneath sounded hollow as he stepped on it. What's under here?
Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Now here, grab a wheelbarrow and follow me.
Caseus nodded and grabbed an old metal wheelbarrow and followed behind Sabo as the light from the rising sun began to crest the horizon. He followed Sabo out into a large field where hundreds of leafy stalks stuck out of the ground. What are these?
Zakava. They'll fetch a good profit once they've been cleaned and sold in the market. Watch carefully.
Caseus walked to Sabo, who got on his knees and pulled one of the vegetables out of the ground and placed it in the wheelbarrow.
Now you.
Caseus put on a pair of gloves and got down, and pulled upward on the stalk only for it to snap and leave the Zakava stuck in the ground.
You're pulling too harsh. Grab the stalk firmly and gently pull.
Caseus nodded and grabbed another Zakava stalk and gripped firmly before gently pulling upwards and removing the vegetable from the dirt and placing it in the wheelbarrow.
2 down, 300 to go.
Caseus sighed as he and Sabo began pulling the Zakavas from the soil. It was tedious and mind-numbing, but it kept him busy. Kept his thoughts from Vader and Sarah. By the time they had removed 100 of the Zakavas, Caseus' back was killing him. You've been doing this kind of stuff by yourself?
More or less. It's hard work. But listen.
Caseus listened and heard only the breeze in the air and the swishing of the grass. What am I supposed to be hearing?
Nothing. That's just it. Farming has its troubles and trials, but it's peaceful. I used to live here with my wife and my son.
Where are they?
Well, Shava, my wife, she passed away a few years ago. Went peaceful in her sleep. My son decided to head out into the galaxy to make his own path.
Where's he? Sabo wiped some dirt from his face and looked down.
I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in 3 years.
I'm sorry.
Well, as long as he's safe. That's what matters. What about you? Any family?
Not really. My parents gave me to the Jedi to train when I was very little. I don't remember much about them. I remember vague images of my mother and my father. Not much else. I grew up in the temple. My master, she taught me everything I know. She died to save me.
That must have been difficult.
Yeah. Sabo looked closely at Caseus' neck and saw Sarah's braid.
What's that?
Caseus looked at his braid and gently touched it. I lost more than just my master that day. Jedi aren't allowed to fall in love or form attachments. but I did. I loved her. We were going to leave and start a new life out here.
And that's why you're out here?
I'm out here to hide. This just seemed like a viable place to do so.
There's rumors stirring in the galaxy. People who want to fight back.
There's no fight against the Empire. Believe me. The Jedi are gone. Any fight taken to them would be suicide. Harbo nodded and decided not to press the matter as they continued to uproot the Zakabas. By mid-morning they were finished as Caseus stood and stretched.
Not too shabby. Thought we'd be working till at least noon.
What's next?
Well, I'd say it's time to feed the animals. Come with me.
Caseus followed Sabo to the barn and helped grab 2 large bags of feed. On the opposite side of the barn was a large pen filled with small feathered birds with long tails.
Just take a few handfuls and scatter the feed.
Caseus nodded as the birds came closer, awaiting their meal. Reaching into the bag, he pulled out handfuls of seeds and scattered them in front of the birds as they began to peck and eat away.
On to the swine.
Sabo led him over to the pen where just yesterday he was partaking in the slop. Grabbing a big metal pail full of food scraps and old trimmings, Sabo carefully poured the disgusting mess into the trough as the swine came and began to eat.
Care to help yourself to a sample, boy?
Caseus rolled his eyes as Sabo chuckled.
Just one more.
Walking out into the field, Harbo pulled out a few Zakabas from his overall pocket and let out a loud, high-pitched whistle.
Come and get it, girl.
From over the hill, a tall, horse-like creature with long ears trotted over. It was taller than Caseus. What is that? Sabo walked over and gently stroked the fur of the creature.
This here is a fathier.
Never heard of him.
Very peaceful creatures they are. This here is Donna.
What does she do on the farm?
Donna helps by being a faithful friend. Not every animal on the farm needs to end up on the table. She belonged to Shava. Now she's mine. And she's been a good companion ever since. Go ahead, you can pet her. She likes that.
Caseus carefully stepped over and reached out his right hand as the fathier carefully examined him before sniffing his fingers and gently lowering her head as Caseus stroked her fur. She's beautiful.
Here.
Sabo handed him the Zakabas.
If you feed her, she'll fall head over hooves for you.
Caseus smiled and fed the fathier, who happily chomped the vegetables. Caseus had never had many interactions with animals at the temple. None that weren't trying to kill him, at least. It was a bit surreal. Suddenly, the fathier looked up and bolted into the grass, leaving Caseus confused. What's going on? Sabo looked out into the distance with a hand over his brow at an approaching speeder.
Get inside. Stay there until I call you.
Are we in trouble?
You will be if you don't do what I say.
Caseus hesitated. He could sense that something was off, but went back to the house and stepped inside, staring out the window as Sabo waited. 3 men in a speeder approached and hopped out, holding clubs and pipes.
How are you doing, Sabo?
I thought I told you to stay off my property, Zolan.
Yeah, see, I would, but there seems to be a slight problem.
Zolan stepped out of the speeder and stepped over to Sabo.
You still owe us credits for keeping this property up and running.
I paid you everything I owed you and then some. You and I have no further business. Now get out.
I wasn't asking, Sabo. Give us our credits, and we won't have to make a scene.
You and I both know you're just gonna blow those credits on liquor. If you want to indulge in your vices, find another source of income. Maybe get a real job.
Zolan chuckled and struck Harbo across his face as the old man got up and punched Zolan in the stomach, only for the 2 other men to grab Sabo by his arms as Zolan punched Sabo in his stomach several times. Caseus clenched his fists and looked at his gear on the table at his lightsaber. No, he couldn't do that. But he could do something. Sabo doubled over and coughed as blood trickled down his lip.
You know, I thought age was supposed to make you wiser.
Zolan rolled back to punch him again. Back off. Zolan looked up and saw Caseus holding an old rake handle.
Who's this, Sabo? New hired hand?
The other two dropped Sabo and looked at Caseus as Zolan stepped forward to face Caseus.
Since you're new, maybe I should describe how things work around here. You see, Sabo here doesn't technically own this farm. We do. It's on our land, and he pays us to keep it that way.
And this is how you get your money? By beating him senseless?
Sometimes people just have to learn the hard way.
Caseus smiled. I agree. Caseus quickly knocked Zolan in the face with the rake handle, knocking him to the ground as the other two rushed at him. Caseus quickly sidestepped, then grabbed one by his ratty hair and threw him to the ground before whacking him across the face. The other grabbed a metal pipe and swung at Caseus, who dodged and ducked every swing before hitting his hand, causing him to drop the pipe. You're really bad at this whole intimidation thing. The scoundrel threw himself at Caseus, who moved aside and was already behind him, gently tapping the top of his head. Just having an off day?
Why, you?
Before he could make another move, Caseus jabbed him in his stomach and whacked the back of his head, tossing him to the dirt. Zolan stood, holding his broken nose.
Who the hell are you?
I'm the guy who's going to make sure you leave this farm alone from now on. Try anything like this again and I'll break more than just your nose. Zolan gritted his teeth and kicked his men as they stood up and rushed back to the speeder. Caseus helped Sabo to his feet.
This isn't over, Sabo. Not by a long shot.
Zolan and his men zoomed away as Caseus glared.
What were you doing? I told you not to get involved.
That's not what I do. When people need my help, I help them.
That's just it, boy. You're lucky you didn't have to rely on any of your Jedi tricks. If they found out who you were, we'd both be in trouble. Then who will help you when the Empire comes knocking?
Caseus looked down and sighed.
But for what it's worth, thank you. Maybe they'll think twice before coming back here.
They better. Later that evening, after a long day of farming and toiling in the sun, Caseus sat down at the table, hungry and tired.
Tough work, isn't it?
Caseus nodded as he ate his food.
Tomorrow we'll keep the harvest going and head into town for some tools I need. Some of the shingles are leaking when it rains, so I may need your help there.
Caseus nodded. Sabo, when your wife died, how did you get over the pain? Sabo closed his eyes for a moment before looking back to the young Jedi.
The pain never leaves, Caseus. Time numbs it, but it never leaves.
Caseus looked down.
This girl you told me about, her death seems to be weighing on your mind above anything else.
Caseus sighed. I told her I would be there for her. That I wouldn't let anything happen to her. When the temple was attacked, I wasn't there. When I found her, she was already dead. Sabo, I promised her. And I failed. How am I supposed to move on?
I don't pretend to know what you've suffered through, Caseus. And at so young an age. I can't empathize with a pain like that. But you can't live in your grief forever. At some point you have to pick yourself up and ask yourself, what will my next step be? Will I continue to drown in my sorrow? Or will I get back on my feet? The choice is yours, but think. Your master, your friends, this girl, what do you think they would want you to do?
Caseus looked at the lamp, then over to his lightsaber sitting on the table. I know they would want me to move on. But I don't know how.
If you want my advice, maybe it's time to start a new life. The galaxy isn't safe for the Jedi anymore. Put aside the laser sword. Put aside the memories. If you don't, your path will only lead you to more suffering than you can handle.
Caseus closed his eyes tightly and ran his fingers through his hair. If I do that, If I give up on who I am, on what I am, I've truly failed. Sabo set his hand on Caseus' back.
Not if you live a life worthy of their memory.
Caseus looked into Sabo's kind, weary eyes. If he didn't know better, he would have assumed him a Jedi for how wise his words seemed. Everything he said made sense. For almost 2 years, he'd been so focused on revenge. Justice, Drabok called it. And that desire only made things worse. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to start over. I'll think about it. Good night, Sabo.
I'll see you in the morning, son.
Upstairs, Caseus sat on his bed, his mind fuzzy and tired from the day's work. As he got ready for bed, he heard a knocking downstairs. Standing up, he carefully made his way to the stairs and peeked out as Sabo opened the door. In the doorway stood a young woman holding a very young little girl in her arms.
Carla, what are you doing out here this late?
I'm sorry to bother you, Sabo. Our cart broke a wheel on the way home. Would you be able to help us?
Oh, of course, I can't say no to you. Or little Liara here.
Sabo ran his fingers through the toddler's hair. Kala smiled and looked up the stairs, seeing Caseus.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company.
Oh, don't worry. That's Caseus. He's helping me out on my farm during the harvest. Caseus, come here.
Cautiously, Caseus made his way down the stairs and stood before the woman.
Caseus, this is Carla, and her daughter Liara.
Pleased to meet you, Caseus.
Caseus smiled and nodded.
Now let's get that wheel fixed up and get them on their way, shall we?
Caseus nodded as Sabo grabbed his tools and followed Kala and Liara out to their cart. A small horse-like creature sat in front, trying to pull the broken cart.
Caseus, help Carla lift the cart so I can reattach the wheel.
Kala set Liara down and helped Caseus as they hoisted the front end of the cart. Harbo quickly got down and reattached the wheel. As Caseus set the cart down, he felt a slight tingle at the back of his neck. An odd sensation. Turning around, he saw Liara playing with a twig in the dirt. Caseus smiled and knelt down, facing the young girl. Liara looked at Caseus and smiled widely, giggling loudly. As she did, Caseus thought for the briefest of moments he saw a pebble by her foot move. Before he could think it over, Kala picked up her daughter and smiled to Caseus.
Thank you so much, Caseus. It's good to see that Sabo has someone to help him out around here.
No worries. Though I probably won't be around much longer. I'm just passing through, staying here for a couple days.
Oh. Well, it was good to meet you anyway. Take care, Caseus.
You too, Kala. Caseus waved goodbye as Liara smiled and waved her hand.
Nice folks. I knew their father. Good man.
They seem nice. I better get some rest. Sabo chuckled as Caseus walked inside.
You know, she's single.
Not interested.
Just something to think about.
Caseus went upstairs and took off his tunic. As he did, something clattered out of his pocket onto the floor. A pebble. How did that get there?